After my husband died, my own relatives slowly stopped inviting me to every holiday and family gathering. For years I kept calling them, cooking meals and waiting, until one day I quietly sold everything and disappeared from their lives forever. I made the last call when it was 6 in the evening one day before Christmas. The phone rang 3 times, then went straight to voicemail. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stood beside the kitchen sink. The turkey was roasting in the oven. The smell of boiling potatoes filled the house. The table was set for 6 people. But the house held only me. My name is Ellen Parker. I'm 59 years old and I live in Toledo, Ohio, a small city that feels even smaller when the winter wind blows off Lake Erie. Back when my husband Daniel was alive, this house was never quiet. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. People showed up whether they were invited or not. My sister and her kids. Daniel's brother. A couple of neighbors who practically lived at our table. Sometimes we had to bring extra chairs from the garage because the dining room wasn't big enough. Then Daniel died. And strangely, it felt like my family died with him. The first year after the funeral, everyone said they were busy. The second year they told me the kids had their own plans. By the third year, some of them had stopped answering my calls altogether. So I kept cooking. I kept calling. I kept waiting. I work as a cashier at Walmart. 8 hours on my feet scanning groceries, smiling at strangers, asking people if they found everything they needed. By the time I came home in the evenings, the house felt so quiet that sometimes even the hum of the refrigerator sounded loud. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. Medical bills from Daniel's hospital stay, the mortgage payment, electricity, gas. Before Daniel's heart attack, we had managed everything together. 2 incomes, careful budgeting, a little saved for emergencies. After he was gone, only my paycheck remained. And that paycheck was just enough to keep the lights on and the mortgage barely breathing. But every holiday I followed the same routine I had followed for 20 years. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie. And every time the food went cold. 5 years passed before the first real doubt crept into my mind. Until then I had believed the excuses. Busy schedules, traveling kids, life moving too fast. But one hot afternoon in July, something shifted. I was scrolling through Instagram and ended up on my niece's page. There was a photo posted just an hour earlier. The entire family stood in a sunny backyard around a grill. My brother flipping burgers. His wife laughing. The kids holding paper plates. The caption read, "Family barbecue." There was only one person missing from that picture. I stared at the screen for a long time. Long enough that the phone felt heavy in my hand. Eventually I placed it on the kitchen table without saying a word. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't cook dinner. I sat on the couch and stared at the quiet living room, thinking about how maybe this hadn't started after Daniel's death. Maybe it had begun long before that. Maybe Daniel had been the thread that tied everyone to me. When that thread snapped, the connection simply vanished. In the months that followed, something inside me quietly changed. I still went to work at Walmart every morning. I still stood behind the register scanning cereal boxes and milk cartons. But I started noticing people differently. Older couples who walked slowly through the aisles together, leaning slightly toward each other like 2 trees that had grown side by side for decades. Single women counting coins carefully before handing them over to pay for groceries. One afternoon, while watching a gray-haired woman pay with exact change, I asked myself a question. If I died tomorrow, how many people would actually come to my funeral? The answer that formed in my mind was so quiet it frightened me. A week later I opened the door to my bank. The decision hadn't appeared overnight. It had grown slowly out of years of silent disappointment. Years of cold dinners and unanswered calls. I sat with the banker and looked at my accounts. There wasn't much money. Nothing close to wealth. But there was one thing Daniel and I had spent 20 years building. The house that we had paid that mortgage month after month, through layoffs and car repairs and hospital bills. Brick by brick, payment by payment. So I called a real estate agent. He walked through the house, took photos of the living room and kitchen, measured the backyard and nodded thoughtfully. "The market's good," he said. "This place will sell quickly." 3 weeks later, it did. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my brother. Not the nieces and nephews whose birthday cakes I had once baked every year. While packing, I emptied each room slowly. Daniel's old toolbox in the garage. Our photo albums from the early years of our marriage. The wooden dining table where we had eaten our very first Thanksgiving as husband and wife. Some things I kept. The rest I sold or gave away. On the final day when the house was completely empty, I stood alone in the kitchen. The walls were bare. My footsteps echoed softly against the hardwood floor. I ran my hand along the countertop where I had once prepared hundreds of meals. Then I walked outside and closed the door. After that, I disappeared. I rented a small apartment in a quiet coastal town in South Carolina. The building was old but clean, a few blocks from the ocean. Most of the residents were retired or living alone. People who spent mornings walking along the beach and afternoons sitting on balconies watching gulls circle over the water. The first few weeks felt strange. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. One morning I walked into a small coffee shop on the corner. A thin, elderly man sat at a table reading a newspaper. When I stepped up to the counter, he glanced up and smiled. "You new around here?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He folded the newspaper and introduced himself. "Name's George. If you ever want to know where to get the best fried fish in town, I'm your GU." It was such a small moment. But it had been years since someone spoke to me like I truly existed. Not as someone's sister. Not as someone's aunt. Just me. A few weeks later I started working there part-time at the coffee shop, helping with the morning shift. Customers came in sleepy and quiet, ordered coffee, talked about the weather or the fishing boats out on the water. Life felt simple. One afternoon George asked me a question while we were wiping down tables. "So what brought you all the way here?" he said. I thought about it for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I figured maybe life still had another chapter left. He laughed softly. That's what keeps most of us going. 6 months later my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my sister. "We heard you sold the house. Where are you?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off the phone. This wasn't the kind of revenge people shout about. There was no courtroom. No screaming arguments. It was something quieter than that. They had erased me from their lives slowly, piece by piece. One day, I simply erased myself completely. The only difference was that this time the decision was mine. And for the first time in many years, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. I was finally present in my own life.